Just like most people in the world, I do not watch the MLS, and I've never watched more than a handful of MLS games in my 21 years on Earth, and more importantly, living in the United States. No one here really cares about the MLS, and neither do I, but I decided to give it a chance. Please join my Discord if you are interested in having a space to talk about football. The link will be in the description. This past week was the opening week of the 2024 MLS season, and I decided that I'm going to force myself to start watching the MLS. Like most football fans in the United States, I held the opinion that the MLS is awful for many, many years, without ever truly watching it. I think most Americans think like this because it's not a major league. The MLS is sort of a joke in comparison to other sports leagues in the US because football is not taken that seriously here. So, I watched 6 MLS games this past week, and let's just say I had a lot of fun and there are many positives. I came into this without having any knowledge about the MLS. I don't really know which teams are supposed to be good, which teams are supposed to be bad, and which players are supposed to be the best players in the league. Honestly, I think this lack of knowledge really improved my experience because I didn't have any expectations for anything. I started watching a league with an open mind. I felt like how I felt when I was a kid watching the Premier League for the first time. I had to learn about all of the players and the teams that I had never watched before. The first thing that really stood out to me was the atmosphere. The matches that I watched were surprisingly loud. I know that MLS fans are clowned constantly on the internet, but the atmosphere genuinely surprised me. It's not like I heard crazy creative chants, but the noise was quite loud in the stadiums. I think all of the drums and the active supporter sections behind the goals really did help with this. I think a big reason why the MLS atmospheres are not at an elite level yet is because of the lack of football culture in the US. The culture is growing and it will continue to grow, but I'm going to assume that most people who go to an MLS game are not going because they are insanely passionate about the sport or about the team. A lot of people probably go because they view it as an event to go to, rather than a meaningful personal thing for them and many others. For example, most people who go to an Aston Villa game probably live and breathe football, and more importantly, live and breathe Aston Villa. This is why the atmospheres in stadiums in places like Europe and South America are generally great because the fans are there because of a passion and love for the team. However, I would doubt that most people who go to an MLS game are there because they live and breathe that MLS team. I just don't think Americans have gotten to that point yet. Something else that genuinely surprised me was the individual player quality. The players are really not that bad to watch. There are some ballers in this league from what I've watched so far, which I will talk more about later. There have been many players who have played in the MLS and went on to become very good players playing in Europe. So it's really not surprising that there are very talented players in this league, and the MLS is improving and growing every year, so the players will probably just keep getting better and better. There's this idea that the MLS is just a retirement league, which is obviously true in a way, but I think that only judging a league based on the ex-superstars who are using it as a pre-retirement experience is very silly, because those players don't represent the majority of the league. Sure, top European players would never join the MLS in their prime, but that doesn't mean that all of the other players are bad. There are many leagues around the world that players would never join in their prime, but those leagues don't receive anywhere near the amount of hate the MLS does, which makes sense because the MLS is not as good as those other leagues, and also, let's be honest, everyone likes to hate on America and Americans just a little bit. It's always funny when I see a random English guy calling the MLS bad as if he's ever tuned into a game. Now, back to the individual player quality. In the Cincinnati versus Toronto FC game, Federico Bernardeschi, a player who won the Euros with Italy less than 3 years ago, didn't really look out of place at all on the field. He looked like a regular MLS player. Maybe he just had a poor game, but just because some players used to play for European teams does not mean that the MLS is a walk in the park. Obviously, you won't find world-class footballers in the MLS, but this is a league with players who can hold their own and who are decent players. Something that was both a good and a bad thing about the games that I watched was the lack of tactics. By this, I mean that there were no play styles that were clear to see, which is different from what you would generally see in top leagues around the world. There were no intricate tactics or visible patterns of play in the games that I watched. But again, I've only watched 6 games, so I would definitely need to watch more to fully develop this point. The reason I say this is a bad thing is because of how open the games were. There were times when the gap between the midfield and the back line was enormous. and the opposition would just flood into that space. Defensively, the teams did not look like they worked or moved as a unit. There was no cohesive defensive press or anything like that. However, the openness of the games and the lack of tactics kind of made the games more fun to watch. As someone who often gets a bit bored by how tactical matches are nowadays, it was refreshing to see teams and players have less restrictions on them. I like watching footballers be footballers, not robots. This helped for the games to be a bit more end-to-end and exciting. The 6 matches I watched were Inter Miami versus Real Salt Lake, which ended 2-0, LAFC versus Seattle Sounders, which ended 2-1, DC United versus New England Revolution, which ended 3-1, Orlando City versus Montreal Impact, which ended 0-0, Cincinnati FC versus Toronto FC, which ended 0-0, and LA Galaxy versus Inter Miami, which ended 1-1. As I mentioned before, there were a lot of players that impressed me in these games. I really liked what I saw of Dennis Boanga from LAFC. I know that he is supposed to be one of the top strikers in the league, and I think he showed that against Seattle Sounders. The goal he scored was an absolute banger. For Seattle, I really liked what I saw of Pedro de la Vega. He looked quick and sharp. He looks like a very exciting dribbler and ball carrier, and I really hope to see more quality from him throughout the season. Another Seattle player I was impressed by was 18-year-old Obed Vargas. He was so composed on the ball and was so good at opening up space for himself. I was genuinely shocked when I saw that he was only 18. Another player who I thought was a standout performer was Christian Benteke. He got himself a hat-trick and was a problem all game for the New England Revolution back line. The Premier League has previously witnessed the quality Benteke has, and he looks like he still has a bit of that quality. For New England, I really enjoyed watching Carlos Hill. He scored a worldie, and he had a lot of good moments throughout the game. Despite New England being a man down for the majority of it, he was vital for the chances that New England created. Same could be said for youngster Esmir Bayraktarovic. He looks like a very intelligent young talent with fantastic ability on the ball. Hopefully he ends up playing for the Bosnian national team instead of the US because we are in desperate need of good footballers. The final player who stood out to me was Ricky Puig. He did miss a penalty, but he was running the game for LA Galaxy. With players like Messi, Busquets, and Suarez on the field, Puig was the star of the show. He looks like a very technically gifted player and is very creative. Overall, I had a lot of fun watching the MLS for the first time. Of course, there are problems with it, and I understand why many people don't enjoy watching it. Many people don't enjoy the fact that the sport has been structured the same way as other American leagues, meaning there is no promotion and relegation. And I understand how that may suck the excitement out of the league for many people. All of my opinions shared in the video could definitely change in the future, but these were just my first impressions. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Please tell me your thoughts about the video and about the MLS in the comments below. Again, please join the Discord if you are interested. Thank you for all the recent support, and thanks for watching.